So you may ask yourself, we're here at a landscape conference. Why on earth is this guy up there talking about seeds? And I'll try to convince you over the next 7 minutes that, in fact, seeds have a lot to do with landscapes. Seeds are the foundation of agriculture, the biological foundation of agriculture. The genetic diversity that is contained within these seeds is underpinning global food supplies everywhere. And if you think about landscapes, really what you should see here is foodscapes. You should think about how these landscapes have, in concert with human diversity, evolved and helped biological diversity, agricultural biological diversity, seed diversity to evolve. So if you talk about crop diversity, you talk about human diversity and landscape diversity. And together, in a mix of evolution over many, many thousands of years, we have gained crop diversity. Crop diversity, when we talk about that, we have to think about, of course, where it comes from. And you can see here that our crops that we eat all around the world originate from many, many different parts. Mainly in sort of so-called centers of domestication. We have a lot of crops originating from these parts of the world. Most of them are not in Europe or in North America. They're often in tropical zones. Of course, in West Asia, we have the most important origin of crop diversity, the Fertile Crescent, where agriculture in this area originated and spread into many parts of the world. And so when we talk about crop diversity, we should also always think about where does this crop diversity originate from and where is it still found in farmers' fields. We've looked at this a couple of years ago. We looked at data that has been accumulated over several decades at FAO that mapped out the use of different crops in different countries for the production of agricultural commodities and also the food consumption, the calorie values that are coming out of these foods. And if you look at where what we eat in the different parts of the world, as mapped out here in this diagram, you can see where the food calories that we're using are actually coming from, where the crops originate from. And if you do this progressively, you can see how the world, every part of the world, is connected to another part of the world. And we call this the global web of interdependence in primary regions of diversity of crops and food supplies. So crop diversity is a truly global common good. No country is self-sufficient in the diversity that it holds, and we are all, as humanity, dependent on each other to provide access to that diversity. We then also looked at a time series and tried to figure out, is our dependence or our interdependence on this diversity globally growing over time? And yes, it does look like, indeed, crop diversity, the interdependence of nations on crop diversity is growing. So we are becoming more and more interdependent, and a lot of that has to do with a global homogenization of food supplies. We eat in more and more parts of the world, we eat more and more of the same things. That is due to forces of globalization, but also climate change means that more and more farmers in different parts of the world have to look at using different types of crops, again, often crops from elsewhere, which means that we, again, increase our interdependence. Climate change, I already mentioned it. The impacts of climate change on agriculture are predicted to be severe. With every degree rise in temperature, we're thinking about a 2% decrease in agricultural yield. And these effects vary vastly across the globe. Different parts of the world are affected by climate change very, very differently. Here are just a few examples. But every agricultural system that is facing climate change and that is trying to come up with a solution will have to have very localized solutions that work for a particular system and the particular challenges it's facing. And this is where, again, crop diversity is really important because many of these varieties that we have within our crops are adapted locally to specific environments and specific landscapes that they've been originating from. One example of the importance and the complexity of modern breeding is shown in this slide, where we've looked at some data of a popular wheat variety, which is the product of 3,170 different crosses involving 51 plant genetic resources from 26 countries. Again, you can see how incredibly interdependent we are also when it comes to modern crop breeding and crop improvement. So when we talk about the use of this diversity for climate change adaptation, we can think about the use of it in breeding to develop climate-ready varieties, but also the direct use of greater diversity by farmers can lead to more resilience in production systems. It also can play a role in mitigation. Use of diversity in crop breeding for varieties that require less inputs is an obvious one. And you can even think about ways to design production systems that act as carbon sinks. Perennial crops is a great example there, where you actually create carbon sinks in agriculture. At the same time, unfortunately, we're losing a lot of the diversity. Here in Germany, a good example is apples. There were literally thousands of different apple varieties. Even here in the Rhineland, were grown only 200, 300, 400 years ago. But now, all the major apple varieties grown in Germany originate from only 6 varieties. This is only one example to show you how crop diversity is disappearing from landscapes everywhere. If you think about the rich landscape that I showed you as an introduction, unfortunately, more and more what we're seeing are landscapes like this. Landscapes that are much more homogenized, landscapes that are much less diverse, and landscapes that also harbor much less crop diversity. Here are another few numbers to just show you the scale of the issue. In China, we think we've lost about 90% of rice varieties since the 50s. In Mexico, about 80% of the corn varieties since the early 1900s. So what to do to counter this? I'm just going to take you on a brief journey up to the far, far north. This is the very northern tip of Norway, Svalbard. There's a lot of things there, including polar bears and a lot of reindeer, but there's also this seed vault that is built into the side of a mountain. It acts as the backup vault, the backup facility for seed banks everywhere around the world, where this crop diversity can be rescued and saved to be recovered from in case disaster strikes. This backup facility is connected to many active gene banks, international collections, and also national collections. We here at the Crop Trust in Bonn work with many of these gene banks. The international collections, first and foremost, it's one of the biggest international systems that is conserving that crop diversity and making it available every year. Luckily, the importance of crop diversity is now recognized specifically in the SDGs. SDG Target 2.5 speaks about the importance of crop diversity and also ways we can safeguard this. And we have here at the Crop Trust recently launched an initiative in support of this SDG Target 2.5 called Food Forever. So I ask everyone here in this room to think about the importance of crop diversity, actions you can take to make sure that the diversity in your diets is a substantial one. We need to come together to safeguard, share, use, and celebrate crop diversity. Thank you.